my dears, as I promised in my religion video, I present to you a video about Quakerism, which is my religion. Now, before we begin, I do want to say that one of the core tenets of my religion is that we don't proselytize. I think I pronounced that right, which is trying to convert people to our religion. So I'm just here to tell you about it because people always ask, answer some of your questions, tell you why I converted to it from the religion in which I grew up, because I think all narratives of religion are important, and also show you the really cool Quaker art project that I did that was supposed to take me like 2 weeks and took me like 2 months, and it's really pretty, and I'm really proud of it, and I really want the world to see it because I spent a really long time on it. So, as you probably know by now because I mention it in vaguely most of my videos. I'm a Quaker, or a member of the Religious Society of Friends. I'm not technically a member, I'm working on that. We're getting there. Now, Quakerism is one of the 3 peace churches, which are pacifist sects of Christianity, with the other 2 being the Church of the Brethren and Mennonites. And a lot of times when I mention that I am a Quaker to people, they respond with like, oh, that's like Mennonites, right? And I've never understood why they made that connection, but I did some research and now I kind of get it, but also no, we're not similar at all. But anyway, that's a video for another day. An exact definition of Quakerism is pretty hard to come by because the religion is, by definition, very, very fluid, and it's less like, we believe this, this, and this, and you need to follow these things, and much more focused on just like how you live your life based on some core principles. So let us start with the history. Quakerism was created in England by a lad named George Fox with some of the major concepts by his lady friend. I don't say lady friend as in like they were, you know what I mean. A friend who was a woman, Margaret Fell, in the 1600s in response to the hypocrisy of the Church of England and those who were a part of it. Some famous Quakers include Cadbury of Cadbury Eggs, William Penn, the founder of Pennsylvania, the guy who identified Hodgkin's lymphoma, and President Herbert Hoover. Also, if anybody says anything about Quaker Oats in the comments, I will be very sad because no, Quakers have a reputation for being very honest people, which we'll talk about later, and therefore good business people, so other companies took the name, slap it on their products to make them seem more trustworthy. We're not here for that. Don't take our religion and use it for your own monetary gain. Ew. Now, some cool things created by Quakers include the chocolate bar, sanitary napkins, which ultimately became menstrual products, Red Delicious apples, the board game Monopoly, the song Simple Gifts, and also we have been doing cognitive behavioral therapy and gay marriage since the 1600s, which I think is really fun. Also, historically, we have been the leads of the suffragette movement, the civil rights movement, staunch abolitionists that led to these campaigns all over the world against slavery, and we're specifically cited as some of the only people taking care of soldiers returning to Germany during World War I, which ultimately meant that we were one of the only minority religions spared in the Holocaust. You can also see Quakers aiding elderly, disabled, and injured people, and on the sidelines basically throughout history. Now, as I mentioned before, we do not believe in missionaries or trying to convert people to our religion, which also includes children. So you cannot officially become a member of the Religious Society of Friends until you choose to at or after the age of 16. So when I converted, I was 14, and I still identify as a Quaker, but I haven't actually settled as a human being in order to go, I'm going to this meeting now and I'm going to become a member of this society, which is why I'm not like technically a Quaker, but I identify as such. You can still obviously come to meetings and do community things, but that is when you are officially able to become a member of the meeting. And now, speaking of meeting, how do we worship and pray? Now, Quakers do what is called silent worship, where we all come together and sit in silence as a community and reflect as a form of worship, which if you just think about that by itself, like a bunch of people in a room sitting in silence, that sounds really culty and creepy. But then if you actually think about it a little bit further, you'll realize that most other religions also have some aspect of silent prayer as well. Also, meditation is a thing, and this can and does very much overlap with some Quakers, so do with that what you will. And also to the people who say, okay, but like I can't sit with my own thoughts for like 5 minutes without losing it, I don't understand. I used to be that way too. It usually takes me about 10 to 15 minutes for my brain to fully settle and relax, so just hang in there and try again. Also, the times when you least want to go to meeting are 100% the times that you need it most. But anyway, the way that the meeting works is that silence begins the second the first person enters the room and ends when 2 Quakers shake hands. Now, in my experience of meetings, that handshake is then spread to everybody else in the space. I don't know if that's how it's traditionally done, but logically that would be the case. Meeting is typically about an hour long, once a week on Sunday mornings, though it can also be anytime, anywhere, and for any length of time, as so desired or needed. Also, meetings aren't always entirely silent. If somebody feels moved to speak, they may stand up and do so, and typically meetings are set up either in a circle or a square with everybody facing the center of the room to be one large interconnected community. We also have special meetings for special events. For example, weddings and funerals have their own silent worship structure that is slightly different from the traditional meeting structure, and those are also the only meetings where you are allowed to prepare your text ahead of time to say aloud during the silence. And also, while we're talking about weddings, Quaker weddings are really cool because the partners walk in together and they do the whole like, do you take this person? It's completely gender neutral because you refer to each other as friend. And also at the end of the wedding, every single person present signs the marriage certificate. And that also includes children because they are equal members of the wedding as well. It's unclear to me if any animals present would have to sign, but if I have a service dog at my wedding, or any of my friends or guests do, which is statistically very likely, I will probably have them sign it as well because they're just as much an equal part as anybody else there. Now, at this point you may be thinking, okay, but if there's no sermon or scripture reading, but like you have weddings and stuff, who is in charge? And we will talk about the core Quaker beliefs in a hot second, but one of them is equality, which means that nobody is any better or any less than everybody else, which is super, super great, but also logistically, somebody has to be vaguely in charge, right? So we have the elders, and elders are elected for 3-year terms, and they do important jobs like organizing committees and managing funds and rosters and the building and creating events and all of those good things that need to exist in a Quaker meeting community. These people must be nominated and voted on by others, and they can only hold the position for 3 years and only have 2 consecutive posts. Also, I believe that you can be any age. But back to the thing about sermons and scriptures. Do we have a Bible? Not really. We have the Quaker Book of Faith and Practice, which is full of advice and queries on all kinds of things, including the history of the religion, different kinds of meetings, like the weddings and funerals and stuff, and queries and thoughts from Quakers in the 1600s, and also Quakers now. What I find really, really cool about this text, other than it being the reddest book that I own and also just a lovely sensory experience to hold and read, it's beautiful, is that it is updated every single year. This specific book is UK based, and every year a meeting is held with representatives from meetings all over the UK, and they go through to see if anything needs to be changed or updated to stay in line with the times. There's kind of versions in the US, but they're not as cohesive, so I prefer the British one. But either way, I think it's really lovely. Also, the other thing is it never says, like, you must do this in this situation. It instead gives you some questions to ponder for yourself in a certain situation to come to your own conclusions about what you want to do. And while that sometimes can feel really, really annoying when you just, like, want to be told what to think or how to feel and get guidance that way, it actually makes you take the time to think deeply about your values and truly think critically about your viewpoints and actions, which ultimately makes you a better person and not just blindly following beliefs. Now, when it comes to God, the answer of the oft-asked question, do Quakers have a God, is very complicated because yes and no. First of all, you can be a Quaker and also be part of another religion. We really don't care. You do you. And second of all, we believe that any and all interpretations of God are valid and welcome parts of the Quaker religion. The most common idea is the one that I most agree with, and that is that God is not some like omnipotent being in the sky, but rather a small piece in every single person. Like, basically, God, or for people who struggle with religious trauma, the spirit, inner light, whatever term feels safest to you, is the combined goodness of all people, with love being the center of the universe. And we believe that all humans are connected to each other through this common goodness. And that's kind of where one of the core beliefs of Quakerism originates from. We believe that because there is God and good in everyone, everybody is a good person with the full capacity for good. And therefore, every human deserves redemption, deserves the chance to learn and grow, and must be treated fairly because there are no bad people, only good people and bad actions. And honestly, this is the thing that I kind of personally struggle with most when it comes to trying to live authentically Quaker, because sometimes I wonder if maybe that's not the case. I mean, in the last few months, having to interact with a former abuser again and realizing the kind of person that they are, I started to doubt this and struggle to understand why a person can be good and, given the chance for redemption, while also continuously denying that they've hurt people and proudly continuing to do so. Like, I truly want to believe that there are only, bad actions with good people behind them, but sometimes I'm not so sure, and I want to be honest about that, because in a lot of my more controversial videos, for lack of a better word, where I bring up this belief of mine, like, for example, my gaslighting one, I tend to get a lot of comments being like, bad people do exist, and I need to recognize that. So I'm just putting out there, this is where my point of view on that comes from. I try my hardest to believe that everybody genuinely has the best intentions and beliefs going into a thing, regardless of what that outcome may turn out to be, and that we should try to understand those intentions for everybody involved in a situation and treat them fairly and with the same compassion and understanding as other people. But anyway, for those of you who are wondering why I forgive my abuser and why I try not to speak ill of them or even say their name, now you know where my point of view on that originates. Also, just in basic science, because I know that most bad people are really just traumatized or hurt or scared or insecure and they don't really know any better. And this idea is not like, welcome the axe murderer into your home because they're misunderstood and deserve a second chance at life. Like, no, it's more of a understand that maybe there's a little bit more to the story than you thought. Keep your guard up, but also be open-minded and treat them as you would treat any other human being. So when it comes to core principles, the general idea is to live the best by yourself and others and make the world a better place the best way you can. And we do that with several core principles. I was taught them as the SPICES when I went to a Quaker school, which is an acronym for simplicity and sustainability, peace, integrity, community, equity and equality, and stewardship. And I know that other people also include justice and truth in there, though I will argue that maybe those both fit under the category of integrity? Not sure. But I'm going to go through each one of those things, explain kind of what it means and how that impacts how I live my life. So the first is simplicity and sustainability. And basically this idea is that you should only take from the world what you need to in order to survive and give back more to the community. Don't be greedy, don't ask for too much, and be kind to the physical environment as well, because it is just as important as anything else in the world. And what I think is important to note here is that we're not saying, hey, get rid of all of your belongings and live with absolutely nothing and be 150% eco-friendly. You can live in Quaker simplicity and also dress like this or use plastic straws if you need to. You cannot give back to the community if you're unhappy and unwell, and we recognize that. And also, you are kind of the only one who can dictate the line between need and want, and that's for you to understand for yourself. The second is peace. As I mentioned earlier, Quakerism is one of the 3 peace churches. And what that means for us is that we get out of the military draft as conscientious objectors. Not that I, as an autistic, disabled, trans person assigned female at birth, would even be near a draft, like, at all. But still, no wars for me, so cheers for that. But also, violence, as you likely know at this point, is not just physical violence. It's also violence with words, actions, and systems. So we, therefore, strive to end all violence as best we can. Many will abstain from cursing or from using any hurtful language towards others. Lots of other Quakers will refuse to have arguments and will instead try to genuinely understand the other points of view and come to some sort of agreement. And I am one of those people. I do not argue with people and I try not to have arguments. Now, to clarify, this does not mean that we just like ignore our problems and roll over and accept whatever other people say because we refuse to argue. Quakers tend to be the most outspoken people against injustice, like to a point where it's been a problem in history, but we also tend to do it kindly, which tends to really piss some people off because they think that we're trying to act like we're better than them or whatever. We're just trying to be decent human beings, and we know that if we talk nicely, people are more likely to listen to us, but people aren't used to, that kind of interaction. So, yeah. But anyway, so justice, I guess, kind of ties into this as well, since we see systems and injustice as a form of violence. So, therefore, we're going to work to dismantle those as best as we possibly can. You will see Quakers as activists way more often than not, and if you look at major movements throughout history, you can usually find a Quaker somewhere behind it. For example, Gandhi was friends with a lot of Quakers. But again, this does not mean, go stand up for every single cause all the time. We know that that is not realistic. Instead, put all of your energy into just a few things and try to make change that way. Now, when it comes to integrity and truth, we believe in saying things in a straightforward manner, being open and honest and clear at all times. And that includes when that honesty could hurt us in the process because it's worth it if we're helping the wider community. The only time that it is acceptable to lie is if it is a white lie specifically to protect people. For example, Quakers hid a lot of Jewish people during the Holocaust, and if explicitly asked if they were hiding anybody, they would lie and say no. But a funky way that Quakers have often gotten into trouble in the past is that we don't take oaths or vows or swear things because we always live by our truths. And by saying, like, I promise to say nothing but the truth or whatever that oath is, that's insinuating that we have not been truthful in the rest of our lives. And so we often disagree to do that. And people in authority tend to not like that. Also, speaking of authority, we believe in following our own inner truths rather than external rules. So, if a law is ethically bad, we won't follow it. Which has also gotten us into some trouble in history. Oops, the next tenet of this is community, which I think is pretty clear at this point. We believe in giving back to our community, putting the needs of the community before our own if need be, though you can't pour from an empty cup, and treating all people with kindness and goodness because we are all connected by our inner good, our inner light, and are all therefore part of the same community, and this is why we refer to fellow Quakers as friends, with a capital F, friends. And that brings us into equity and equality. We believe that everybody is equal and should be treated as such. So you will see Quaker elders speaking to children like equals, albeit on their developmental level. Parents and children talking like equals. I went to a Quaker high school where we referred to most everyone, including our teachers and the principal and whatnot, by their first names, and we treated each other as equals, which is really great because now in college, I'm not afraid to approach my professors and have like a regular human-to-human conversation, and I've made a lot of friends that way. But again, in history, when Quakers kind of ignored authority and treated authority figures as equals, that wasn't always taken too well. But back to the developmental thing I mentioned earlier. We also include equity in our definition of equality. We understand that everybody has different strengths and weaknesses and needs. Equality to us isn't just like treat everybody blanket the same. It's treat everybody like a human being, but don't put anybody on a pedestal over any others. So whatever the needs are, we're happy to meet them. And this is why, as much as I love you guys, sometimes when we're messaging in my DMs, you talk to me like I'm your idol, and you also do that in the comments, and it's really weird because you're a human, and I'm a human, and therefore, we're both humans. And we're equally as cool and spicy and spunky and fun. And I'm so happy that I can be some sort of guide or role model for you or whatever, but being idolized makes me feel really gross, because that's really weird, and I don't believe in that. Anyway, I digress. So lastly, we have stewardship and service, which I looked up stewardship and I realized it basically means sustainability, but service is like giving back to the community, that kind of stuff, yeah. So in summation, that's what Quakerism is. Kind of, because it's super fluid and also different for literally every single Quaker. I also do need to acknowledge that as idealistic and perfect as the religion may feel by the explanation I just gave, that's how a lot of religions work, and also it does have its struggles like any religion does with people not following through on the beliefs but thinking that they are, including Quakers thinking they're morally better than other people. But also in my experience, the incidence of that is significantly lower in the Quaker population than I've seen and or experienced in other religions. And honestly, I think that has to do with the fact that like, you can't really be indoctrinated into Quakerism because we don't allow that. And also due to the whole like truth and integrity thing, people totally call each other out in their BS. They do it kindly, but they still call other people out. Now for me, going to a Quaker high school, I found that every single Quaker teacher or friend of mine seemed to have some level of calm and peace that I simply didn't have, and I didn't see it in anybody else, and I wanted that. I also loved being able to see and treat my teachers as equals, to feel in line and equal with all of my classmates, and to have silence once a week to reflect on that week and on my own needs and wants, as much as I begrudgingly went sometimes. I also, as you can probably tell by how much you may know about me from my videos or in life, I very much am already in line with how this religion works, just existing. It's fluid, it's flexible, it's understanding of needs and differences. I'm also typically a very optimistic person who's very focused on morals and humanity. So this kind of just took the path I was already going on and put a couple benchmarks in the way to help me along and make things a little bit easier for me along the way during rough patches. So I'm going to close out this video by showing you the art installation that I made using excerpts from 35 of the 42 original queries written by George Fox in 1656, which weirdly hold up to today, as a way to remind myself daily of these values and try to input each one of them as I live my life and give back to the community. I will say that I still struggle with saying that I am a very religious person, and it's something that I kind of keep my religion to myself because how much I grew up fearing other people who were so open about how religious they were, simply because for me that was often synonymous with corruption and hypocrisy, and saying I'm religious makes me think of the church where I grew up rather than the one that I am now a part of. Also probably because this doesn't majorly feel like religion to me as much as the other one did, it just feels like life. So I've slowly been working my way through the Quaker Book of Faith and Practice to try and heal my religious trauma and whatnot, and I also found that walking through basilicas throughout Europe this fall really helped with a lot of that healing as well, but I just want to be honest about that. And yeah, that's Quakerism, that's what it means to me. Hopefully this has taught you a little bit more about me and my value system and where a lot of my ideas and points of view come from. A lot of why I do this, why I'm on YouTube, why I make videos, why I exist on the internet space and work as an advocate is because of my Quaker beliefs, and I really think that comes through in my work on some level, for better or for worse, or maybe not. I will let you decide. You're the ones who are consuming it. But I hope that you learned something today. If you have any questions, you are welcome to leave them in the comments and I will answer them as best I can, though please remember to be kind to each other. I know religion's a touchy topic. And again, no pressure to be a Quaker at all whatsoever. This is simply for educational purposes, but I will include some resources and links to learn more if you do find that this somehow resonated with you and you want to check out more about Quakerism. Also, this video was actually a request from one of you in the comments. So if you guys have any more requests in the Quakerism category or otherwise, feel free to let me know and I will definitely add it to my list. But anyway, as always, thank you for listening, thank you for learning. Remember, it is never too late to start over, and I look forward to seeing you, my dear, in the next one.